Hi, this is Annie. Welcome to my channel. Today we will be making this beautiful Colorado Blue Columbine granny square. Colorado Blue Columbine is the state flower of Colorado, and this granny square is part of my state flower granny square project. A couple of things before we get started. First of all, this is an intermediate level tutorial. So while I will be showing you how to make the square, I will not go into a lot of detail for basic crochet techniques. So if you're very new to crochet, I would recommend you start with one of my beginner-friendly tutorials on my channel. A second thing to mention is that this square is my original design. So I do ask you that whenever you use your squares, that you give me credit for the design. So I will include separate instructions in the description of this video to make it easy for you. To make this granny square, you are going to need 5 different colors of yarn. If you want to make your Colorado Blue Columbine in 5 different colors, like I've done here. When I was looking up pictures online of this beautiful flower, I could find kind of 2 different colors. Some of the pictures were kind of more purple, and the other ones were kind of more blue. So I've made one of each, but for this one I'm going to be using this blue color. And I am using a DK with 100% cotton yarn, which I really like using for granny squares, but you can use whatever yarn you like using for granny squares. Then you're also going to need a crochet hook, a yarn needle, and a pair of scissors. To make this granny square, we are going to be creating 2 layers of 3D petals. So this flower is really special. It has kind of this yellow middle and the white petals around it. And then it has another round of petals, which is this blue, around these white petals. So kind of 2 totally different kinds of petals in the same flower, which makes making this granny square also very interesting. So we're gonna start by making the center. So we'll start in the middle. And I'm gonna start by making a slip knot. And then I chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I will join this into a ring by slip stitching here in this very first stitch. You can also start with a magic ring if that's how you prefer starting your granny squares. And then I will chain 1. So now for the center of the flower, I am going to be creating 10 single crochet stitches around that ring that I just created with those chain stitches. And for me, I like to count this first stitch that I chained here, the chain 1. This counts as my first single crochet. So I'm going to be creating 9 more around this ring. So I'm just going to go ahead and insert my hook here in the very middle of that ring. Bring that yarn through, yarn over, and pull through both loops. I'll make another one. So insert in the middle, bring the yarn through, yarn over, and oops, So yarn over and pull through 2. Now I can see the center of this ring a lot better. So this is how I create all of those single crochets around this ring. So far I have here 3 actual single crochets, and then that initial chain 1 that I also count as a single crochet. So I'm gonna be creating 6 more single crochets around the ring. Feel free to go ahead and create your single crochets and meet me back here once you have 10, including the initial chain 1. So I have created all my single crochets around this ring. The single crochets can be really hard to count, at least for me. They're really hard to count here. So I often like to double check by counting the stitches here on the outside to make sure that I have 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And now when I close this round, this loop here on my hook is going to make the 10th stitch here on the outside. And for me, I like to slip stitch right here, so kind of in that first stitch on the outside to close this round. And now for the next round, I'm going to need 10 stitches here on the outside, and I'm going to count this one as one of my stitches, and I'm also going to count this one as one of my stitches where I just slip stitched. That's just my preference and how I like to do it. I feel like the center is smoother that way. However, I do know that a lot of people don't count that initial chain 1 there as a single crochet. So if you don't count that and you want to make 1 more single crochet, feel free to do that. The only important thing here kind of is that for this next round, you still have 10 stitches here on the outside, because that's gonna make a difference for our next round. So do make sure that you have 10 stitches here on the outside, no matter how you like to start and close that first round. So we are ready to start working on our first round of petals. So these white petals here, we're going to be making these next. And the first thing we need to do is to attach our yarn. I like to attach my yarn with a slip knot. If you prefer doing something different, feel free to do it your way. And then I will attach my yarn. Remember how we counted the stitches here on the outside after the previous round? Now I will attach my yarn into one of these stitches here on the outside of that circle. Alrighty, my yarn is attached, and I will start my first petal by chaining 2. 1 and 2. And now, next I will move on to the next stitch here on the outside. So this is where I have my yarn and that chain 2. I will move on to the next stitch here on the outside, and I will create 2 double crochets in that same stitch. So I go yarn over, I insert in the next stitch, bring that yarn through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And another one, yarn over, insert in the same stitch, pull the yarn through, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. So far I have the initial chain 2 in this first stitch here. In the next stitch I created 2 double crochets, and then I will chain 2 again. And now I will slip stitch into the next stitch here. So not where I have those 2 double crochets, but in the next one here. And this is my first petal. I'll show you another one. So chain 2, 2 double crochets in the next stitch, after those 2 double crochets I chain 2, and then again I slip stitch into the next stitch. And then to start my next petal I chain 2 again. There we go. I've got 2 petals so far, and I'm going to need 5 in total for this round of petals. So feel free to go ahead and work 3 more petals. All the petals are exactly the same way. So if you need to, you can rewind, go back, see how we made this one, and make 3 more petals the same way. And once you're done with your petals, meet me back here. So I'm on my last petal here. I have just chained those last 2 stitches, and now I will be slip stitching this here into the very same stitch where we first attached the yarn and started this first petal. So right here in the same stitch, just make a slip stitch there. Alrighty, there is our first round of petals. And before we can work this next round of petals, which is going to be these beautiful blue star-shaped petals, we are going to need something back here behind our work where we can work these petals. And as you can see here in this square that's already finished, these petals are kind of positioned right in between 2 of these white petals. So 2 white petals here, and this blue petal is right in the middle. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be creating loops behind the white petals. If you've made 3D granny squares with me before, we always kind of create the loops right behind the petals. So there's 1 loop behind each petal. But for this one, since I wanted these blue petals to be kind of right in the middle of 2 white petals, we are going to be creating these loops back here a little differently. So we are essentially going to start in the middle of one of the white petals, chain, and then slip stitch in the middle of the next white petal. I will show you here. I hope it makes more sense once I show it to you. So I'm here. I have just closed this round here with a slip stitch. And now what I want to do here, this is the back of my work. I'm going to be working here. I want to slip stitch my way right in the middle of this petal here. So I'm going to start here. I'm just going to go through this 1 loop here first. And I slip stitch there. There it is. And I'm gonna go through this next loop. And I slip stitch there again. So now if we look here, I have slip stitched through 2 stitches, and on this petal I still have, this is the first loop on this petal, and this is the first loop on this next petal. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And at this point I go and I slip stitch through 2 of these stitches. So I go through 2 loops, the 2 middle loops. They can be a little tight, so you might need to pull them just a little bit to be able to get through both of the loops. And I slip stitch here. And now I'm in the middle of this petal here on the back. I will chain 2 here, and now I will be slip stitching in the middle of the next petal. So I have to count these loops here on the back. This is the first one on this petal on this side, and this is the first on this side. So I kind of go and find the 2 middle loops on the petal, and I slip stitch through the 2 middle ones. I know they can be a little tight if you need to go through one loop first and then the other one. And I slip stitch there. And I chain 2 again. And I go here, the next petal, and again I make sure that I find the 2 middle loops for this petal. So this is the first one on this side, first one on that side. So those 2 are the 2 middle loops. So there's one, really tight, but it can be done. Okay, go one at a time if you need to. And then we slip stitch there. And that's how I create all the loops. So now I have 3 loops here behind my work. So I'm just gonna go ahead and create 2 more loops here behind my work. So work those and meet me back here. So here is my last chain of 2. And now here it can be a little bit hard to see where to slip stitch to close this. I'm gonna go ahead through this stitch here. And just slip stitch there. And I slip stitch here to the start of this first loop to make it secure, and then chain 1, and I can cut my yarn. And fast enough. Next we will start working on this second layer of 3D petals, and I'm gonna go ahead and attach my yarn with a slip knot again. And I will attach my yarn here in the back to the start of one of these loops that I just created, those chains of 2. So right in the beginning. I like to make sure that I pull this yarn tight here to Make sure it doesn't escape anywhere. And I will chain 1 here. And now, before I start working on those actual petals, I'm going to be creating kind of like a base here for the following round. So I'm just gonna be making 3 single crochets into each one of these loops. So now this chain 1 here is not going to count as anything for this round. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make 3 single crochets into this loop here. There we go. I have my 3 single crochets. And then I will just move right into the next loop. And 3 single crochets here. There we go. And that's how I create those 3 single crochets into each one of these loops. So feel free to go ahead and work yours, 3 single crochets into each one of these loops, and meet me back here. I have just created those single crochets in those loops, and now I'll just go ahead and slip stitch here into this first stitch here on the outside. There we go. And now it is important when you close your round that you don't accidentally get rid of one of these stitches here on the outside by slip stitching too far or anything like that. I know people start and close their rounds a little differently, so you still want to make sure here that you have 3 stitches here on the outside. So if I count here, this is my first stitch for this loop. I have 1, 2, and then I have 3 here where I just slip stitched. And then this counts as the first stitch for this next round. So I have 1, 2, and 3 there as well. And now we are going to start working on this star shape, which is these blue petals here. And I'm going to start right here where I slip stitched. So now it's also important that I always start a petal here in the very first stitch of these 3 stitches. So I'm currently here because this is where I slip stitched. I still have 1 and 2 stitches here. And I'm gonna chain 6, but now I'm going to chain these 6 stitches a little bit looser than I usually would. I tend to chain pretty tight and in general crochet pretty tight stitches, but here I do want to make sure that I'm crochet these 6 stitches a little bit looser. And I'm gonna tell you in just a little bit why, okay? But here we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now I'm gonna be working into these stitches to create that petal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore this first stitch here from the hook, and I'm going into the second one, and I'm creating a single crochet into this stitch. Now I don't need to be creating especially loose stitches or anything. I can create my usual stitches now. It's just those chain of 6. So there's a single crochet. Then I create a half double crochet in the next one. And now here be careful because you'll see a big kind of loop there. That's because the previous stitch is sort of pulling it that way. that's not where we're creating the next stitch. It's going to be in the next one here. So half double crochet into the next one. There we go. Then I create a double crochet in the next one. And again, I'm careful not to go into this one, but into the next one. Double crochet. Then I will create a treble crochet. So I go yarn over twice and I go in the next one again, not into that one, but here in the next one. A treble crochet. And then I will be creating another treble crochet. So yarn over twice and I go now here into this very first chain stitch that I created. A treble crochet there. And there's my petal. And now to secure this petal, I'm going to be slip stitching. I'll skip here 2 stitches. Okay, so this is where I started. Skip, skip, and I go into the third one, which also is the stitch that counts as the first stitch on the next loop. So this one right here. Not this one, but this one. And I slip stitch. And there is my first petal. And now the reason I told you to chain these stitches a little bit looser than you usually would is that if we create these too tight, this petal is going to be pulling a lot like this way. And even when you kind of loosely chain them, you might want to pull this petal a little bit there to straighten it out, because those chain stitches sometimes bunch up a little bit. I'm gonna show you another one of these petals. These are really fun, but I know that they can also be really, really confusing. So I'm here where it says slip stitched that previous petal, and now I chain 6 loosely. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Here I am. I'm going to ignore that first stitch from the hook, and I work in the next one, a single crochet. Okay, so this is nothing, and I go into the next one. Create a single crochet. Now with my usual tension, I don't need to try to make these stitches loose anymore. There it is. Then in the next one, a half double crochet, and again, not this big loop here, but the next one. A half double crochet. Then a double crochet, not in this big loop, but in the next one here. A double crochet. I know this can feel really weird at this point and look really weird, so you just kind of have to trust the process here and trust that it's going to turn out good in the end, even though it feels a little funny here and looks funny with that stretched loop and everything. So next I go yarn over twice and I create a treble crochet in the next stitch. Again, not in that big one, but here. And then another treble crochet in that very first chain stitch we created. And then I will secure this petal with the slip stitch again. I will skip 2 stitches, 1 and 2, and this third stitch, which is also the first stitch on the next loop, I slip stitch there to secure the petal. There we go. They're starting to look like those petals in this finalized granny square. So go ahead and work 3 more petals, blue petals, exactly the same way we work these 2. So if you need to go back, feel free to rewind and see how we made this one, and make 3 more petals exactly the same way. So I'm here, this is my last petal, and I'm ready to slip stitch this. Just wanted to show you where I like to slip stitch here. So here is where I started this round, so I'll just go ahead and slip stitch there into that, skipping 2 stitches here, okay? 1 and 2, and into the third one, which is where we started the round. There we go, we have our second round of petals. And now, before we start working on this background, again, we are going to be creating loops behind this round of petals. So we're going to be working behind our work again. And here I have just slip stitched here to close this previous round, and I will chain 4 here. This is my first loop, and I will slip stitch it here. Now this is going to be a lot easier than the previous slip stitching the previous loops, because we're just going to go right here in between these 2 petals. I like to pick up 1 stitch from this side and then 1 stitch from the other side, from the other petal, and slip stitch there right in the middle of those 2. So chain 4, and we secure this chain by slip stitching here right in the middle. So I pick up 1 stitch from this petal and then another stitch from that petal, and I slip stitch there. So chain 4, and we secure this with a slip stitch by picking up 2 stitches from 1 from each side to make it nice and secure there. And I chain 4, and slip stitch, going through 2 loops. And 1 more, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now here is my first loop. I'll find still 1 stitch on this side and another stitch on the other side. And I slip stitch. And then I just like to go into this first loop here and slip stitch there, and chain 1, and cut my yarn. And then I can fasten off. There we go. There is our Colorado Blue Columbine. We are ready to start working with our background colors. So I'm going to be working with this army green next to create these leaves around the flower. And for this next round, the only thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be working into these loops that we just created. Here you can't see it anymore because we're going to hide these loops underneath this next round. And all I'm going to be doing here is creating 8 double crochets into each one of these loops we just created. So let's go ahead and attach our yarn. I attach mine with a slip knot. And then I'll just go here into the beginning of one of these loops and attach my yarn. Pull it tight there. And I chain I chain 2, and this chain 2 counts as my first half double crochet. I'm taking care of my yarn ends as I go, so that's why you see me holding these together with my work. Okay, so there's that chain 2, and now I will just work 7 half double crochets into this loop, because each loop is going to have 8 half double crochets, and that chain 2 there counts as my first half double crochet. Let's see how many I have. I lost count. So initial chain 2 counts as a half double crochet. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, I have 8. That was perfect. You may want to pull these stitches a little bit to make sure that they are evenly spaced out on that loop. And then I'll just go ahead and I'll go straight into that next loop. And I create 8 half double crochets into this loop as well. So just like this. So I need 6 more for this loop. So feel free to work around creating 8 half double crochets into each one of these loops behind your work, and then meet me back here. I am ready to close my round here. So I have worked all those half double crochets to cover up the loops, and then I just close this round. I like to go here into the second stitch here, counting from the bottom. So 1 and 2. And slip stitch there. Alrighty, and now if we look at this finalized square, we can see, what we can see here is that this flower is sitting kind of straight in the middle of the square, in the sense that we have one of these long petals here in the middle of that side, and then we have two here on the opposite side that are kind of the same distance from this middle point, so that the flower very nicely sits straight in the middle. So that's what we're going to be doing. And for us to be able to do that, we need to start this next round at a certain point. And we need to start it in the 6th stitch, counting from here. So let me show you. This is where these two petals come together. This is where I have one loop, and then there's the other loop. This is where I'm currently at. And I need to start this next round in the 6th stitch, counting from this point here, where these two petals join. And I'm gonna show you here how I count those stitches. So this stitch here, I count as the first stitch on this loop. And then this one here is the first stitch for that loop. Okay, so this is the first one where I'm going to be counting from. And I need to count to 6 here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I need to slip stitch my way to this stitch. I'm actually only a couple of stitches away here. So I'll just go here into this next stitch and slip stitch, and then I go into the next stitch and slip stitch. And now I'm gonna make sure that I'm in the right stitch, okay, and I still have 8 stitches in total in this loop. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's where I slip stitched. And then I have 7 and 8. This is the last stitch for this loop. And this stitch here counts as the first stitch for this next loop. So I still have the right amount of stitches here. Now this is important that I have those 8 stitches in each loop, because now we're going to be counting these stitches for this next round. We're going to be creating clusters of double crochets for the corners, clusters of half double crochets for the sides, and then we're going to be skipping certain stitches. So we need to make sure that we have the right amount of stitches here as a base of this next round. So I'm in the right stitch here, stitch number 6, counting from here. And I will chain 2 here, which counts as my first double crochet. And then I will create 2 more double crochets into this very same stitch. This is going to be my first corner. As my half a corner, I chain 2 for the corner. Then I will skip 1 stitch here, and I create another cluster of 3 double crochets into the next one. So skip 1 and go into the next one. And that's my first corner. Then I will skip the next 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, and I go into the 4th one, and I create a cluster of 3 half double crochets there. So 1, 2, 3, skip those, go into 4th one, and a cluster of half double crochets here. There we go. Then I will skip again the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. And in the 4th stitch, I start my next corner. So I create a cluster of 3 double crochets. So skip, 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 and into the stitch number 4, a cluster of 3 double crochets. I chain 2 for the corner. I skip 1 stitch and I go into the next one and I create another cluster of 3 double crochets. Let's see what I got here. So I got 2 corners and a side so far. And this is the way we work all around our square. So creating clusters of double crochet in the corners. We always skip 1 stitch in the corners in the middle and chain 2 for the corner. And then on the sides we do a cluster of half double crochets, and on the side we skip 3 stitches on either side of that cluster of half double crochets. So go ahead and work around your square. If you need to go back and see how we made the corners and the sides, go back and make the sides exactly the same way we made this side here. And the 2 remaining corners are going to be exactly the same way as this corner here. So rewind, go back and watch it again if you need to, and work around and meet me back here. So I have worked all around, and as we can see, this is starting to look a lot more like a square already. And if we turn it this way, now this is the petal here that's kind of straight in the middle of this side here. And now I'm just gonna go ahead and close this round, and if I've counted my stitches correctly, I should have here 1, 2, and 3 stitches before that initial chain 2. So I'll just go ahead and slip stitch here to close the round, and then I slip stitch my way all the way to the next corner, because that's where I like to start my rounds. All right, I know this is not the easiest granny square to make. The flower has a lot of things going on, but so rewarding when it's done. And now for the rest of the square, it's gonna be super easy, because we're just gonna be creating 2 rounds of granny stitches all around, and I'll make this next round still in the same army green color. So I'll just create excuse me, I'll just create double crochet granny stitches all around the square, and in the corners I keep chaining 2 like I did before. So I'm just going to show you a couple here. I slip stitch my way to the corner here. I'm going to chain 2, which counts as my first double crochet, and then I create 2 more double crochets for this cluster. I chain 2 for the corner, and I create another cluster of 3 double crochets into that same corner space. One more. And there is my first corner for this round. And then I'll just go ahead and work clusters of double crochet into these spaces here between the clusters of the previous round. So 3 double crochets right here. There we go. And that's how I work all around my square. So it's just clusters of double crochet into those spaces, and in the corners I do 2 clusters separated by a chain 2 for the corner. So work all around yours and meet me back here. All right, I'm ready to close this round. So there's my last cluster. Now it's a slip stitch here. And now I'm going to cut my yarn here. So I chain 1 there to fasten off and cut my yarn because I want to create that last round with a different color. So for the last round, I will be using this beige color kind of to create this border around my square. So same thing as before, we attach our yarn. I'm going to attach mine with the slip knot. And I like to start from a corner. So attach the yarn there and I pull it tight. And this round is exactly the same as the previous one. So I chain 2, which counts as my first double crochet, 2 more double crochets for the cluster, chain 2 for the corner, and then another cluster of 3 double crochets in the same corner space. Here we go. And then I'll just go ahead and create a cluster of 3 double crochets into this next space here between 2 clusters of the previous round. There we go. So that's how I work all around the square. So clusters of 3 double crochets into each one of these spaces, and in the corners 2 clusters separated by a chain 2. So work all around and then meet me back here. I have worked all my granny stitches around the square, and now I'm just gonna go ahead and close this round with the slip stitch here. I chain 1 and I can cut my yarn. And fast enough. And now here is my Colorado Blue Columbine granny square. The only things that I have left here is weaving in the rest of my ends. Most of them I've taken care of already. And then blocking the square. But otherwise, it is all done. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I really hope that you enjoyed making your Colorado Blue Columbine. I'd really love to see what kind of square you made. So if you're posting pictures on Instagram, please tag my account. It's Wildflower and Stitch. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye. Take care.